Hello, good morning. Good morning. Let's see, are we live over here on the Facebook page? It looks like it. All right, awesome. Good morning, everybody. I'm Alison Ellis of Floral Artistry and RealFlowerBusiness.com, here with my new friend, Maricela Eman of Eman Events. Hi, Maricela.
Hi, how you doing?
I am great. I'm so glad that we made this time to get together today to share some really important information with our industry friends. So if you are wondering what we are here for, what are we doing here, we're going to talk about safety for your event during a pandemic. It's going to be fun. The real thing that we came here to do is talk about a plan that Maricela created with her husband. We should give him credit too, right? I'm sure he did.
Definitely.
But for their company. So if you're not familiar with the way that this is going to work here in Vermont, so we've invited people to watch who are not Vermont vendors but need this kind of information too. So this will be like Vermont specific, but I hope people will take these tips and translate them to their own states or countries, depending on where you might be watching. Let's see, I see Lisa. Hey, Lisa, thanks for tuning in. And Victoria, good morning. And Lorraine seems to have an echo, though. Okay, well, thanks for telling us that. Let me see.
It might be me on the headset, and I can...
Well, it could be me. Let's see. Does anybody else hearing an echo? Here, maybe what I'll... Oh, I hear the echo now. Here, I'm going to turn my volume down in case it's me. Lorraine, will you let me know if that's any better or if it's still completely the same? And thank you. So we're here because Maricela made a plan for her business, infectious disease preparedness and response plan. And the reason she did that is because you need that for your company. If you are in Vermont and you have 10 or more employees, if your business has been closed for 7 days, which most likely it has been, 7 days or more, you need your own business plan so that you can train your employees and move forward safely. So there's 3 things we're really going to touch on today. Basic prevention, because there's no such thing as guaranteeing that no one will get sick at an event, right? So we're talking about reducing risk. So basic prevention. We're going to walk through an event because that seems to be the thing that people really need the most help with. What does this look like, right? What does it actually look like to have an event like this with social distancing? And then we're going to talk about training and preparing your staff, right? Which is very, very important. And I know a lot of our vendor peers are solopreneurs, right? I know I am. So, or you have one person who helps you, or you might bring in some freelancers. It's important for you to have a plan for yourself and for those people that you bring in that might be freelancers as well. So first, I want to let Maricela take the lead here by telling us a little bit about, I know you started making this plan back in April. This is not something you just whipped together in the past few weeks. What made you decide that you needed to create this plan?
Probably a little mix between uncertainty and having an excessive amount of time at that point to be able to focus on doing something like this. I knew that when we started moving forward, if we did move forward, that I needed to kind of plan out the way that I was going to be doing things safely. And I did that by, researching everything that was out there at that time. Everything from going through the CDC, through the WHO, OSHA, just any place that I can find any type of regulations that were already in place and possibly were already being practiced. I took what I could from there, did my research and put together the plan in a way where it's laid out the way that an event runs, so that I can focus on just following my steps by steps versus trying to piece it all together right before this event is supposed to happen. I will say, I moved the majority of our events. We still have a couple on the calendar for later this year, and, we'll test it out then on how it goes. But a lot of this is basic information that is out there and that you will see repeated on different sources because it's known to function. And at least to reduce your risk of, coming in contact or exposing yourself.
Right. And, you know, what's interesting is, so Marisol is very modest, by the way. She's a rock star for putting this together. So the link to get this is right here in the stream. So you can just, right here, you'll see a link, you can grab it. This is, I printed it out. It's 40 pages. You can see her sources on the back. Like, she's got a ton of sources here, but it's not as simple as, well, I just looked at what was out there and put it together, right? She's synthesized this. And what we have learned I know a lot of people tuning in are in some of our Facebook groups here. You see the confusion, right? You can hear people saying, well, how many people can I have in an event right now? Can it be inside, outside? How many families can mix at tables and things like that? So even though these things exist, people need help synthesizing it. And that's really the incredible service that your plan is doing for us. Not only can you download this and basically just steal it for yourself, for your company, right? Hi, you're welcome. You didn't need to start in April. You can just have it. Not only that, but it will help you create your own plan if you need one. You may want something, I was going to say you might want something more robust, but the truth is Marisol is like the safety person. She's got you covered. But the most important thing is really recognizing, again, what she has said, what I have already said. This is about reducing risk. It's not about eliminating risk. There is no such thing as, if you follow this plan, everybody's cool, right? You have to, we hope so, right? We hope that if you follow social distancing and stick with your families and everybody comes and you know they're not sick, we hope that works out that way. But there's no such thing as like, hey, come on down to this gathering of people and we can guarantee it's going to be risk-free. So we're talking about reducing risk today. That's really what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. So let's dive into, do you want to dive into the basic prevention? Because I think that is, again, the stuff that's out there, but people need help synthesizing and putting it all together.
Of course. So your basic prevention is a lot of what you've already heard and what you already see set forth by, your state regulations and your stay-at-home orders like we have here in Vermont. So it's all of your social distancing aspects, your hand washing standards, and of course your face coverings and face masks. That's your PPE aspect of it. So it's all things that obviously you've heard and have hopefully been just jammed into you over the last few weeks. And it's just about continuing with those safe practices. In those safe practices, I also included a little bit, just touching on preparing your event side for COVID. And this is just looking through your location and seeing where your high touch areas are, what you can do to, if you're gonna have indoor spaces where you're preparing foods, what you can do to ventilate, how you can keep staff apart from each other, and just create the social distancing, the hygienic areas, and provide signage, all of those, again, basic measures that you can look at your facilities for. And this is actually more for your venue-specific vendors. And you're really going to be walking through your space and walk it the way that you would for an event. What would you be preparing? What would you be setting up? What would you be cleaning, disinfecting, and so on, and moving yourself through there? Do a couple of walkthroughs yourself, make notes of things that you need to change or address. And you're kind of just building your plan by doing that. You're just basically going through a walkthrough on your own.
Yep.
And,
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
What I was going to say is what I have learned from our experience working together, trying to create some like reopening plans, is that, the serve safe measures that we have here for restaurants, for caterers, are pretty stringent already, right? Like they're already doing everything they can to keep people safe. And so we've got a lot of vendors who have things in motion and things in place that are intended to keep people safe. What we need to do is sort of extend that to all vendors and the way that we interact with each other. It's just going to take a little more planning for some of us.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You continue.
No. I was going to touch on that as well. So it's really, you're looking at your operations. You're looking at your business operations, whatever type of vendor that you are, and seeing where your risks are in those operations. Obviously, it's going to be different levels for every single person. As you know, a florist is not going to have the same contact as a planner or a coordinator or as a photographer. So it's just different risks that you need to assess for yourself and where you can make those changes.
Right. So that's, for me as a florist, I feel like, oh, I can do an event safely, right? Because I can do a no contact delivery. I can do all that. But it's not just about me, right? The flowers aren't the only thing that has to happen on the wedding day. So when it comes to this basic prevention, the hygiene, the social distancing, I have memorized these, the 4 pillars of keeping people safe, right? We want to have our flow and our seating assignments. We need to know where people are going to be so they're not intermingling. And same thing goes for us as vendors. We're not looking to have, so oftentimes there'll be, we'll arrive for an event and I'll unload my van, and then the DJ comes or the band comes and they're unloading in the same place in the same time. And then the cake is coming and I'm rushing out to move my car. What we need to do is have time windows where we're doing things so that we're eliminating that crossover. So we don't have to force that interaction of, hey, can you move your van or whatever it is. I'm already out of the way. We already have that flow going. So the flow is going to be related to the pre-event setup and the event itself.
And post breakdown as well. So you're going to need that for after your event, who's picking up what, where, when, what's being cleaned. So like I said, you're going back and really looking at your operations and how is that going to be structured, who gets affected. You're really thinking outside of yourself as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, which is not always easy for us as wedding vendors, not to diss ourselves, but we all think what we're doing is the most important, right? Like the flowers are most important, the photography is most important, the dress is most important, the food is most important. It's all important. And this is going to be an opportunity, right, for us to work together and recognize that we all have needs, that we can help each other create this a safer event by just acknowledging what everyone needs. A question just came in from Linda that's really great. As a venue site, can you dictate protocols to vendors?
Absolutely. So as the venue site, you hold the most responsibility. And if you want to push recommendations and make them mandatory at your site because it will help people adhere to, safety guidelines, then do that. It's really up to you. And it just goes the same way for businesses and shops and things that are restaurants that are now opening. Some have made certain regulations mandatory versus recommended. And that's because that's how they feel is the safest for them to move forward.
That's right. So, we have a unique situation where we don't have a national plan on how we should approach this thing. So we're relying on each state to create some kind of guidelines. And as we are here in Vermont, I feel like we've been pretty good, right, with our guidelines and shutting things down. I have been happy with the response personally. But it's the wear and tear, right? It's wearing on people. Are we going to be required to wear masks in a few months, in a few weeks? Who knows, right? The truth is we don't know where that's going to go. So it may be where you're required to wear a mask, or it may be where, Linda, you decide, you know what? It's safer to just tell people they have to wear a mask here when they're setting up, because then I don't have to worry that I'm not doing everything I can, right? Mm-hmm. It can also be that maybe you decide you're only doing outdoor events for the next few months as you create your own plan. As we know, the airflow and ventilation is a huge factor when it comes to reducing risk. So outdoors is going to be still our safest place to host an event at this point. So you can absolutely create protocols that are more stringent than what the state requires at this point, if you think that's in the best interest of your customers, your employees, your vendors, and just keeping people as safe as possible. I feel like that's kind of a good parlay right into walking through the event. Do you agree with me?
I think so, yes.
Okay, so just to touch on, again, this great question from Linda, you as the venue, or if you're having a private event, if you're somebody who's a landowner, right, you are responsible for keeping, just like restaurants, just like lodging, you have to keep a log of the names, addresses, phone numbers of the people who come to your celebration at your venue. So you have responsibilities to greet people, to communicate the safety information in a really clear way. So why don't I let you take it from there, Maricela? I have just arrived at the wedding, and now what?
And now you will get greeted at a check-in. So this, instead of having just a place where people gather or come in, you need to designate a proper check-in for folks, which you can liven up with signage and things that meet that same design that you're doing for the event. You know, includes pretty florals or whatever you want. But it does have to dictate the rules and regulations of the event site, your safety measures, and that sort of thing needs to be up and very clear. This is also where you would be checking in guests or any vendors that are coming in, so that you know that you have everyone who's supposed to be there on site and no extra people, especially if we have to maintain with a certain guest limit. And just touching on that really quickly, all you do need to get is just the name and a contact phone number.
Okay.
So you don't need to get addresses or anything like that. It's just a name and a contact phone number of anyone who's coming on site. And it's an easy, you know, as people come in, who are you? Hi, Alison, nice to see you. Check you in. That person was on site. And that way you also know who maybe wasn't or didn't arrive to the event last minute. And doing that, like we said, you are maintaining kind of that safety factor of knowing who is on site. And if anything does happen, which unfortunately it can, there's always a possibility of that, you're able to provide the health department a list for contact tracing.
And now restaurants have to do this. Lodging is doing this. I got one of my favorite restaurants here is they announced, hey, we're opening up the patio this weekend. It's the first time. You have to have a reservation. You have to give, so they are requiring addresses. So again, to Linda's question, you can be more robust, right? Yeah. So they're asking for more information than is required. And they're making it clear, like you can be unmasked at your table, but you cannot go inside without a mask. We're going to have different people serving. If you want takeout, there's one person doing that. And if you're going to eat here, there's another person handling that. So it's about peace of mind. That's really a very important piece of, as we walk through the flow of this event. It sounds different, it looks different, but the most important thing is peace of mind, because while people want to have an event, we want to have a wedding. Can we have 85 people in September? Can we have 150 in October? Those are the questions we're seeing right now from people, right? And I understand that. But what's most important is to know that you want your guests to feel comfortable coming to your event. And if people don't feel comfortable, then you're not doing everything you can to be welcoming and to also reduce the risk. So that's what a safety coordinator, or like these rules that I'm saying this restaurant put out there, that's what it's meant to do, to set people's mind at ease. Like we're on top of this. We care about this, and we're not just hosting an event just because it sounds fun. We're really paying attention to how to keep everybody as safe as possible, and follow the rules, the laws, the guidelines. All right, so I'm going to let you go through. So now we have checked in, and now I am going to be given a seating assignment for the ceremony, correct?
Yes. So your ceremony should have a preset assignment. It's just going to be one additional step the clients or a planner or whoever is handling this aspect is going to be doing, just the way that you do seating assignments for dinner. You just group people where they need to sit, and where they need to sit, and you can either have a chart or have tags, however you want to really get that information across. It's up to you. You can be creative in that sense. But grouping households together who live one with one another is perfectly fine. Couples on their own, maintaining that distance. So in maintaining that distance, you can have different effects for your seating layout. Whether you place empty chairs and designate them as an empty chair, list it, do a little X on it, whatever you want to do to make sure that people don't sit there. But you have to create that space between people who are not from trusted households. So it's, at that point, really get creative. And widening your aisle, making sure that your couple is away from the first row, and keeping your officiant, again, at a safe distance from the couple and anyone else. And this is where, once you're in your location or in your spot, you should be able to take off your masks for comfort at that point. But anyone who's walking or intermingling with other people should theoretically have a mask on at all times. Again, this is all dependent on where your specific county, your state, your area, where you are at that point when you have this celebration. Exactly. Keeping aware of those changes.
So that's such an important point. And sorry to trample on your end of your sentence there. It's such an important point because there are certain places where you do, like, for example, in Burlington, if you're getting married, let's say in a church in Burlington, you probably have to wear your mask in there because it's required to wear masks indoors. So it's going to just depend on where you are located, whether you're inside or outside, and you want to pay attention to those laws, those guidelines.
And besides the social distancing, the masks, and signage and the sign seating, those are just a few points that you're going to notice that are different. But the rest, you're still having all your traditional decor, your traditional wedding setup, your processional, recessional, your music, everything's still involved in that. So you'll still feel, the traditional aspects of a ceremony.
And the most important thing, I was talking with a bride yesterday who's considering, like, should she postpone? They're leaning towards doing something smaller on their original date right now and then doing a bigger party next year. But this idea of, the real thing is you're going to be married at the end of the day, right? So let's not lose sight of the most important, the real reason that you're doing this at all, which is the actual, like, we're in love and we want to get married part. So let's never forget that in all of this, the logistics that we're going to lead you through. So ceremony, we have gotten married. Everyone is still, like, seated in their spots. Now everyone is recessioning, right? And we're going to go to the cocktail hour. And what does that look like?
Your cocktail hour is still a cocktail hour. There will be drinks and maybe hors d'oeuvres in a different form of one or another. And but again, you're maintaining your social distance between households who are not trusted, keeping your tables apart. You're not going to see communal food service. Anything like buffets or cheese platters or things like that, anything that's high touch, you won't be seeing. Self-serve beverage stations or anything like that, anything that requires you for multiple people to be touching anything, I would just go ahead and eliminate it. And then, unless you're going to be having someone standing there cleaning it every time, which is probably a logistical nightmare if you think about it. So it's just about creating that space. Your food service or your bar service your bar needs to have that space. What was recommended to me is to put up a shield or a guard in front of, between the guests and the person serving, so that it creates a barrier. But if you are willing to make sure that you have that space, you don't necessarily need that shield in general. Again, all your service staff are going to be in masks. And it's just a general rule that if anyone that's going to be intermingling or coming in close contact with anyone should have a face covering.
Well, and that's a good point. So again, just synthesizing all the things that already exist.
Yeah.
Employees, when you're at work, should be wearing a mask. So that's why she's saying if you're a server, you'll be wearing a mask, because if you are at work, you are supposed to wear a mask. Mm-hmm. So like I went into a store the other day. I think I told you this actually. Did I tell you this? I went into a store the other day. Maybe I didn't want to tell you. But I went into a little store, and the person working there was not wearing a mask. And I'm like, I know you have to, by law, be wearing a mask right now. And of course, I didn't say anything to this little old man, but I have been thinking about it, right? And oh, by the way, they also had donuts just out on the table, open, no cloche, no anything. I'm going, this is so wrong, right? This is not what is supposed to be happening right now. So there are going to be people who don't follow the rules, which is why it's really important to know what they are so that you can do better and actually follow best practices. So if you're working at a wedding, you're expected to be wearing a mask, because people who are at work, if you're an employee, you're wearing a mask to work. That is what the state of Vermont has mandated now. So I see a question from Lisa. What are you hearing about bridal parties? Can you be more specific what you mean, Lisa? You mean like the size or how I'm going to guess here. I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to read Lisa's mind. I love Lisa. That she probably means like the mingling and gathering of the bridal party ahead of time, maybe? Like, what does that look like?
And again, it comes down to your basic travel, quarantine, and your health monitoring. So it goes back to your same aspect. So if your guests or if your wedding party is coming in from other areas, have they self-quarantined at home or in the state and following those specific guidelines? Did they quarantine at home for 7 days prior and take a test, and so on and so on? And once you know that these people are safe and trusted to be around each other, there really isn't any different aspect that needs to happen, unless it's someone who, again, isn't quarantining or hasn't quarantined, or it's coming in from out of state and can't meet those guidelines specifically. You have to make sure that you keep them separate. So they're not going to be getting ready with the bride, and eliminating that close contact with people.
Okay.
They're not.
I see she's clarified. She says before and during the ceremony, she goes, how would you put them? So would you still line them up? Would you seat them? Would you do anything different during the ceremony? Just from your planner point of view. I don't think this is like a rule necessarily. I always keep
like my processional always has a specific distance between, so that you can take photos of each couple coming down. So already that's something that is kind of normal for me to have distance between them. When they're standing for the ceremony, that's really if you're going to create that space between each one of them, if they're not trusted, if they haven't had tests, if they haven't quarantined, so on. So many other factors that you have to go into that. And to eliminate needing to do that, they can come in the processional and sit.
Yep.
And again, you have assigned seating in that case.
Easy solution. Yeah. All right. So where are we at our event? We just had cocktails. I'm feeling a little loose now. Now what do? I am still, so people are seated with the same families throughout the event. So we have our trusted family. We're sitting for the ceremony, and for dinner, similar situation. So we are now moved to our reception tent. And what does this look like?
It looks just like a normal reception tent with a little more space. It might, depending on the way that a client decides to group people, it might look more like a restaurant setting where you have some smaller tables or a mix of different size tables to just keep that space between people. We agreed that having 10 feet between tables is safer, just so that you have that allotted room for your staff to service.
Yeah.
And still maintain that distance from other folks, so that you're just creating that space.
Sorry, can I pause you just for a sec? Because Lori Boyden has a great question. Hi, Lori. It sounds like cocktail hour should not have any seating.
It can.
What say you? Yeah.
Yeah, it can. All I suggest is putting up little signs saying that, once you've selected your table, just stay there. Like that will be your table. You don't want folks sharing the same surfaces too often of different groups.
So you're looking to reduce mingling, which sounds anti-gathering, but it's really, It's really just once you get to your table and you, whether it's a high boy or you do have some that are assigned seating for cocktail hour, you just want to make sure people know, like, please don't walk around with your glass and leave it all over the place or touch other people's stuff all over the place. That's really, we're just trying to eliminate the touch points. And that's why maybe our cocktail hour, much like the rest of our event, might be slightly shorter in duration. Again, on reducing risk, it's about exposure and time, right? So there's one thing if you're, and you've probably, again, heard this on the news, right? If somebody's jogging past you, right? That's less duration than if someone is talking to you without a mask for a long period of time, right? Even if you're outside. So it's about the duration as well. So, with cocktail hour, maybe shortening it a smidgen will also help so that people don't feel that need to leave their safe space.
If you are going to be creating a cocktail space where people maybe are intermingling a little bit more or moving around, that's in the sense if you have something like food stations where someone can come pick up some food, I would create an actual flow for it. So a direction in what your guests or the guest will be moving. You do directional signage, any of those kind of things, so that you're not having a lot of back and forth or reverse flow where people are crossing each other. So it's just, kind of creating that traffic direction throughout that space if you need to.
Just like we're used to at the grocery store, but people, it was weird at first and then people get it, right? Like, this is the inside, this is the outside, this is enter and exit, and we can maneuver these things. We can do it. All right, I'll let you continue with reception. Is there anything, I know you touched on eliminating the high touch points, but maybe we want to revisit that again.
For the cocktail reception, for the dinner?
Or just for dinner, or like any after dinner kind of.
Yeah, and this is, so the high touch aspect of it also eliminates, as most people know in food service, that you're not going to be doing things like buffet or shared family plates. Well, you could do theoretically shared plates if, again, it's a trusted household sitting at a specific table, but you can eliminate all of that and make it simpler by just everyone gets their pre-assigned meal and kind of just cutting that out. The only other thing that I would say for the dinner aspect is that when you have your speeches, or if somebody selects to do speeches or talks or anything like that, that these need to happen, again, at a distance from others, because you would want that person who is speaking to feel comfortable taking off their mask and, relaying some, really nice words about the couple, or, sob story, little laughs. And that would be, the space away from other tables and as well as your entertainment or your DJs. In that, if multiple people are using this microphone, you can talk to your entertainment about either a microphone disinfectant or something. I think there's covers as well. So there's a lot out there nowadays where that you can eliminate that need to, switch out different microphones and that sort of thing.
And that's the sort of thing that your DJ will help you maneuver.
Yes. And that actually just brings us into your post-dinner celebrating. We're all accustomed to having all of our dancing and intermingling, and everyone's lounging and just having a grand old time. And we could still do that. Just you have to remember about your time. Again, this is your time of exposure, and then your distance from other people. Mm-hmm. So my suggestion for myself, like I am suggesting my couples, at least in this first stages of kind of getting back into it, of not having big group dancing. You can still have your first dance, your father-daughter, your mother-son dances, special things like this. And you can still obviously have your music going, create a lively atmosphere. If people want to dance in their own groups, or your entertainment and your planner, your venue come up with ways of creating that space or that distance for people, then you should be able to do that. I've seen, I don't know if you've seen where they've taped down dance floors and created these little squares or pockets where you can come up and dance. Just again, this is like another chance to really be creative and get forward, move forward with your thinking of like, how can we address this and still maintain the atmosphere that we want.
That was one of the very first things that when we first spoke, so we just met like a few weeks ago, month ago, I don't know, time has flown. But so when we first talked, I write down things that sound smart when I talk to people. And I wrote down something that you said that was like, this is an opportunity for vendors to get creative with how we make things happen. And, when we're sitting here going, you can't eliminate the risk and you must, in and out sides and flow and all this, it's like, it can feel a little Debbie Downer, but meanwhile, it's actually an opportunity for creative business owners, for entrepreneurs, for people who are committed to celebrating in a safe way to figure out ways to make this work. So, I think it was Lorraine actually who had mentioned dancing at the tables, right? Mm-hmm. It's made to turn into dancing on the tables. Who knows? But maybe that's a new thing. So on the table and you dance on top of it. But people can get creative, and I do think that this idea of like testing the way that we roll this out, so that we're not just saying, let's just try to pretend we're normal. Let's not pretend. Let's accept the reality and say, maybe it's easier if we don't dance. Maybe that's just easier. Or maybe we dance not under the tent, outside in the field, right? It's like a fish concert. Like, I don't know, but that might be what people end up doing, and they turn it into something that works really perfectly for them. Victoria is in California, and she just said, this document and 411 is incredible. Thank you for sharing it with us. You deserve that. Thanks, Maricela, because it really is very generous of her to have done all this work and share it. And obviously the reason she's sharing it is to keep people as safe as possible, right? That's really why. And Penny says, streamline events and intimate affairs. I love it. So I think that when it comes to picturing the event, I can picture how it comes together now a little bit. What else should we think about in terms of reducing touch? I know we talked about getting rid of the garter toss, and I wondered if we could just get rid of that forever. Reducing, maybe we're not doing a bouquet toss, things that someone has touched, not letting somebody else touch it. Anyway, I'll let you.
For some of your traditions like guest book and other items, you want to eliminate that. There's a lot of creative ways of doing guest books ahead of time. You can do them online. People can offer writing down. I think we discussed it that if you wanted to do cards or gifts, it's still okay as long as people just kind of deposit things and leave them down. You can do a guest book the same way. Everyone gets their own little golf pencil and card.
Yeah.
Or a souvenir pen, and now that they can take it home. But you just have to, again, get creative in the way that you're able to include some of these traditions, but eliminate that high touch aspect, or anywhere that you're going to be intermingling with people quite frequently.
Yep. Victoria has a good one here. She said, I may have missed it, but what happens if when the libations have been flowing and guests start ignoring the guidelines? Obviously, we can't control what other people do. So how do we enforce all the social distancing? So this is the question, right? This is when people want to, and I know you're not doing this to throw up a roadblock, but when people want to throw up a roadblock, it's like, but we can't control people. We can't control what people do. If I could jump in here with my little anecdote from the other day, right? So I was going to pick up my son, and I was listening to the radio, and it was a cooking show, and they were talking about expiration dates on food. And do you know that it is not required for any food to have an expiration date on it here in the United States, except baby food? Baby food is the only food that is required to have an expiration date. All other expiration dates you see are optional. They're opted into by the people who produce that food in order to help you have the best experience with their product, right? Because they don't really want you to buy the milk and then it's sour. They'd rather you know this milk will be best by this date, or whatever, the canned tomatoes are best by whatever date. So that's why it's on there, but it's optional. People opt in to follow rules to keep people safe, even though they're not required to by law. And so that's really something, I mean, that for me was, I was like, what? Everything has an expiration date and everything doesn't have to. That's mind blowing. And so that was like a little ripple for me, that if food manufacturers and people can opt into something because it's the right thing to do, that we as wedding vendors and hopefully as wedding guests can opt in to do the right thing too, to keep everybody safe. But I'll let you give a better answer to what you can actually do, because I'm sure you have thought about this.
That's a great response, and a great analogy. And it's hard to think about.
Just run out to people and say, do you know there's no expiration date needed on your milk? Can you please get with the program?
I know. And but what you can do as either a venue coordinator or whoever is kind of handling the run of show on the day of, is making sure that you have your signage, that you've done everything you can yourself as a vendor. Provide the signs even at tables or other places in your reception space that remind people to keep their distance, as well as the communication factor before the event. Your guests will, or the guests for these events need to be let know what these rules and regulations are ahead of time, and basically commit to that responsibility moving forward and going actually attending an event. You can, I would suggest brides just put it out there and be like, hey, if you don't want to maintain social distancing or wear a mask when you need to, just stay home. It's fine.
Right, so you're bringing up another really great point that I don't know if you would have missed, but I almost would have missed. So we had one of our local stationers, Krista Alexander, make this beautiful little sample of communicating beforehand what the safety guidelines will be for guests. So guests can know ahead of time what it might look like, what will be required of them, how this will work. So they can, and they're invited right there on the safety card to not come if they're not comfortable doing these things. So that's a really, really important thing, is that guests need to be able to opt out beforehand, know the rules, know what's expected ahead of time, so that they can say, you know what, that's not for me. I'm not into that. Or they can say, you know what, this is important enough to me that I will come and I will partake in this ceremony, and I'm here for it. So informing people, and this goes back to a comment that Kim actually made, which I skipped over, but I did not read, that, doing all this, making the guests comfortable, informing people, trying to help reassure people, isn't that just what hospitality is in the first place, right? Isn't that just what we're trying to do all along, is just keep people feeling good and safe? All right, Whitney has a great one. So Whitney's in, I think you're in Indiana. Let me know if I have the wrong state. But she says, this is great. This is not what is happening for events in her area. She says, thank you for doing this. I'm trying to think of how I can share this information in a non-passive aggressive way to other local vendors. Well, you can easily just share this. That's why we're doing this not in a private group and someplace where anybody can see this, anybody can share this, because it really is something that when there isn't a national response, and when each state is kind of doing their own thing, and some are like, hey, we're open, right? And the bottom line is there are 10 states where hospitalization rates are up right now, right? The states that have reopened have more cases, period. End of sentence, right? There's no somebody reopened and their caseload is still low or lower. It kept going down. So we're hopeful that's going to happen, of course, at some point. However, that is not where we are now. So we really need to be have our own policies for our business. And maybe it's something where you can adapt this for your business, Whitney, and say, hey, this is a plan that somebody super smart, who, by the way, we didn't even get into, like, Maricela has done safety coordination for a large company who did like tons of events, political events, all kinds of stuff on the West Coast in San Francisco. So she's not just like making this up. She took these from national guidelines and state guidelines and personal experience and knowledge. So you can say, here's somebody who is knowledgeable on safety, who suggests this. This is what somebody who knows about safety is going to do for her own self, right? This is what she's going to do to run her business. So maybe it's not a bad idea for other people to kind of follow suit.
And there is, so in that kind of like, how do you come across in a non-aggressive way? I did include a few pages in here where you're requesting people to commit to being responsible. And that includes the vendors that you work with. And obviously, depending on where you are at, you can change those responsibilities to better fit what you're doing. And this goes for both, venues and other locations, or even someone who is a planner who wants the vendors that they work with to commit to, the most safe practices moving forward. While you're doing this and they sign that they're committed to do this, and as well as your guests and your employees, then you are not only providing yourself peace of mind, but everyone else that's working with you. If someone chooses not to adhere to any of the rules, you probably don't want to work with them. So hopefully it gives you enough time to find someone more suited.
Yeah. So Lorraine has a good one here. Well, hold on. First, Victoria, she's always got a good one. Kick them out if they're not following the rules. She says, I'm really good at that. And the truth is, like, maybe yes. So actually, we have a more specific answer, I'm realizing, again, from Kim, was saying, like, if people are out of hand, you cut off the bar, right? So it can be as simple as that. If people are not social distancing, like, y'all got 4 minutes to get to where you're supposed to be, or the bar is going to be shut down for the night, right? So you can have that, bargaining chip from the beginning.
At least here in Vermont, since we do have a little bit stricter rules when it comes down to beverage services at these events, we already have to meet some very specific regulations on that and what you're allowed people to do. And if you do notice someone who is highly intoxicated, you need to stop serving them. That is, general consensus all the way around. So you're kind of doing that plus, So if they're drinking and now feeling a little too comfortable, maybe you want to cut off that individual.
Yeah. And again, you can communicate that ahead of time. So they know that is, something that is at risk. She says the threat of taking the booze will get compliance for sure. Brilliant. Lorraine also has a great one. What constitutes a trusted household? Do coworkers count? They work in a hospital together with recovering COVID patients, as does the bride.
Trusted households are households that have maintained or did their quarantine, are maintaining the same practices as each other. And this is basically as a commitment to each other's families that you're kind of running on the same guidelines yourself. When it comes down to coworkers, especially in a COVID setting, that's a little bit different. That's something that you would have to talk to your nurse friends or your doctor friends or someone that in that regards, and like how they're socially interacting with others outside of their household when it comes down that they've been exposed to patients who are recovering to COVID. Very specific case, and you kind of have to look at your options there. Again, your medical staff. I have a really good friend who is a nurse herself in Rutland, and she is head to toe in PPE, just insanely covered up, comes home, like bleaches her shoes, does all these things, all these steps that she needs to do to keep her family safe. And so if people are maintaining that safety measure and getting tested every week, they're most likely probably even better off than we are.
Right.
Because we're not doing that. I'm not getting tested every 2 weeks.
That's right.
So that's it. When it comes down to sitting trusted households together, it really comes down to those individual households and if they're comfortable doing so. So, and again, communication between your client and then their guests on doing that moving forward.
Yep. Judy has a good point on the trusted household. She says the couple/brides will be providing the list of who is in the trusted households. It's who you trust that's doing the same thing as you. So, that's like, for example, how I mentioned I was picking up my son. He's at a trusted household who are following protocols, and we're in touch about like who are we seeing and that kind of stuff. So everyone has to sort of decide their own trusted household. And Penny says, Maricela, do you make contracts for this? So she actually, people who know me know that I've been talking to her about how she can make some online courses about this. But anyway, you already know I talked to her about that. But she does have right in this document, Penny, if you download it, again, it's right here in the link. It's above us, I believe. You can download it for free. And she's got a couple of agreements, things for people to sign off on, like the assignment of responsibility for vendors, for clients, and for employees, I believe. Yeah.
Yes. Those all can be changed depending on your specific operations and what you want your clients to uphold, as well as your vendor partners. And so these are all suggestions, and I do, highly recommend, talking to your legal advisor and making sure that it meets your specific requirements for your location and for your business operations. So always make sure to look at that. Also, going through and speaking to your insurance agent. Most insurance companies have a risk assessment manager that will be able to look through this and go through and make changes according to whatever safety and insurance and employee safety aspects that you need to uphold for your specific services.
So this is leading me to let's just touch on how this plan has already been vetted. Like, who have you shared it with? Who thinks it rocks? And and like the fact that it has been through your lawyer, your insurance company, that kind of stuff.
So yes. So my attorney has looked through this and, just make sure that have myself covered, of course. And as well, I've gone through my insurance company and the risk assessment manager there on what we can do to just keep ourselves protected. In this case, no matter what type of verbiage you put into any of your contracts moving forward, anyone can sue you for anything they want, basically. It's just about including the correct words and sentences and phrases that will get you covered in that case. So again, talking to your lawyer, your insurance company for those aspects. I did submit this to the WorkSafe program here in Vermont, and they provided my very first revision of it. And so went through and adjusted the safety protocols when it comes down to your employees. So number one, you're putting your employees in a high-risk situation. They're coming in contact with a lot of people. And so you have to respect that and understand the responsibility that's associated with that, and what you can do to create a reduced risk environment for them and give them options. Not everyone is going to want to move forward for working in this type of environment. It's really up to everybody's comfort level, and you as an employer need to just be okay with that and be understanding. And there's a lot of things that you can do and address in your services that will continue with those protections for your employees as well. But like I said, it went through WorkSafe and as well as through the ACCD. I won't name drop, but various individuals in there have taken a look at the document, provided some information.
Way high up. Yeah.
Provided a lot of really good feedback and information for us to move forward and feel comfortable kind of sharing this document with everyone.
Yes. So as far as, is this an official, state approved, whatever, it's not about that. This is a protocol that she made for her company, and you should have one for yours. And so why not take advantage of this lovely generosity and really read it, take it in. You'll see it's got everything from as basic as how you wash your hands, right? Because this takes me back to, you're going to go in the time machine, back to elementary school when there was a presentation and they said, how do you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? And the kid said, you put the jelly and the peanut butter on the bread. And so the person who, I think it was a PTA mom, but she had a loaf of bread and she put the jar of peanut butter on top and she put the jar of jelly on top. And she said, okay, so I put the peanut butter and the jelly on the bread. We cannot, that was as you can tell, that was very, very powerful for me, that the way you describe something, right? First, you have to open up the bread. Then you have to take out 2 slices of bread and put them on the counter, right? Then you have to open. That's the level of detail, basically, that Maricela has in here, so that you're not assuming people know how to wash their hands or put on a mask. We're spelling it out. I like to say, I like to dummy proof my life. This can help dummy proof your event to the greatest extent possible at this point.
And originally I did have every little single thing detailed out like that. And now I've provided links just to shorten the document. I was at 65 pages
right.
When I first started with this, and tried to simplify it as much as I possibly could so that it just goes streamlined and it's easier to read. Still, obviously, a lot of pages in here. I do touch on some training requirements, and these are the ones that are in here are very specific to our state. So it's something that you need to look at in your particular location, what is required by your state and for your employees as well as nationally, so that you can move forward with your operations for your services.
So Penny says, thank you for launching a guideline for us all. And then she says, was that easy for you? I'm going to guess she means, I don't know what you mean by that, Penny. Feel free to clarify. Would you suggest we go locally? Oh, probably was it easy for you to get this stuff approved? No, she's a super rock star person. She's she started this in April. She started sending it. She's just she sends an email, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. So she sends it out. She had a contact already, as I recall. Am I correct about that? You already knew this person? No?
No.
You're amazing. You're amazing.
No.
So she's saying my county is 100% open. I am still using caution.
Yes, do it.
Yeah. So do you think she should go locally and ask people also any advice if she's someplace that's 100% open?
I'm sorry, I just don't.
So for example, if she wanted to try to get some guidelines or something in place, a plan approved by somebody locally, would you recommend trying that? Or if she's 100% open, maybe that's not something they're interested in?
Even if it's not with your local area or your officials there, getting a group of either vendors or other people in that same general business to, okay, so how do we operate safely moving forward? And, you can either use my document as a template, or you can write your own and pull out information that is viable, and work on that together, on that specific plan. Whether it's a one-page document that just has a few bullet points that you feel like you really need to adhere to, anything really that other people can all feel good about, regardless if it's approved or not, moving forward is really beneficial to anyone's operations.
Perfect. And similar to what Whitney was saying before, if nobody's following these guidelines, how do I try to like, hey, there's this, there are some guidelines available if we wanted to use them. You could just start a reasonable dialogue with people who are like-minded about this kind of thing. Linda says, uncommon generosity, and it makes me smile. Thank you very much. So thank you, Maricela. And Judy, okay, so Michelle asked, what about subcontractors? So what we should do is probably hop into that third piece that we were talking about, this training and preparing staff piece. So whether it's staff or subcontractors, like what do we want to sort of throw out there that they need to know at this point?
Even as a subcontractor, you provide a subcontractor information about how you want things done, correct? Ahead of time. So it's just, one more page that you add in that information. It's like, I want you to uphold, because you represent me, I need you to do this, and you're committing to that aspect. In those, like I said, in those trainings, it's all specific to your area. Here in Vermont, you have to do the VOSHA training that's online. You take care of that. I've also specifically asked my employees to do ServSafe because they've added COVID points to it. So just keep their ServSafe up to date. We don't serve food, but we intermingle with clients, and it's the same type of exposure. So it just, for me, it was a good base to kind of go off of that as well. And then when it comes down to your specific operations, you should have some type of training plan or something specifically written on how you want your staff to operate. And now you're reworking that to have some of these safety guidelines embedded in that as well. Signage everywhere for your staff, reminders of washing their hands, keeping their distance, how to, put on a mask, how to remove a mask, how to take off gloves if they're using it to clean. All of those little safety measures are all in there. I did include just a couple of, I think I touched on safety meetings. Safety meetings are huge. I used to perform them all the time when I worked for that larger corporation, but, for that big company, we were doing over 900 events a year, very, very large scale. And so you had to keep up with your safety protocols. And it's just reminders for folks. You touch on a certain topic or a subject that morning when everyone arrived on site and they checked in, you're like, just a quick reminder, this is how we're going to break down this evening. I know I already sent you all the emails, but it's that constant communication. Once seasons really get into effect and you're busy and doing more events, you get too comfortable. So right. You have to be reminded of your specific guidelines for your services.
One thing that we should touch on, we would be both so kicking ourselves if we didn't, is this safety coordinator, health coordinator, which again, this is a state specific thing for Vermont, that you need to have somebody who is the person that people can go to, that people can look to for if they have a question about any of these things, any of these new safety guidelines. There needs to be a person who's in charge of addressing that. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, in my document, I switched it to a safety coordinator because a coordinator, that description fits better with events than a safety officer. Mm-hmm. So these are people who are very knowledgeable in safety measures, whatever is set forth by your state and your guidelines, and for your company specific. These people can also perform health checks for your employees as they arrive on site. These health checks is as simple as a questionnaire and asking, have you come in contact with anyone who has tested positive? And are you feeling any of the typical symptoms? In that, it's also very highly recommended, and for certain types of businesses, to do temperature checks upon arrival for your employees, which would you be doing with a touchless thermometer. And if you are going to be moving forward with doing temperature checks for your employees, you need to order that now. My thermometer took 5 weeks to get here.
Okay. But you have it now. So see, she is prepared. She's the person who thinks ahead. And that's why she is so important to share with everybody. And this document is so important because for most of us, and we saw this in the restaurant industry, right? All of a sudden in our state of Vermont, restaurants, like, you can serve people outside. And they were like, but wait a minute, we're not ready. So this can help you be ready, whether your first event, whether you've already done an event and you're like, wait a minute, I didn't do any of this stuff, or you have an event in September or October. There's no such thing as being too prepared too early. So get yourself set up. Venues obviously have been thinking about this. Everyone is in a different place in terms of their own risk, right? And so that's why, like you already said earlier, the venue is number one in terms of having responsibility for what's going on their property. And so those people for sure have been thinking about this, but there are still plenty of people we know who are venue owners who are still like a little confused about what's allowed and what are we following here. So just keeping this dialogue going of let's plan ahead so you're ready, so that when you can have 100 people, when you can have 50 people inside, like, how does that look? Where do your spacing on your tables? If they're 10 feet apart, can I actually have that 25% capacity or whatever it'll be at the time? There's no reason to wait until it's here to go, oh, I'm not ready. Yeah. Like Maricela is taking away your ability to be not ready. That's what we're doing here. Let's see. Penny says, what about the temperature checks for the guests? Vendors are more likely to follow protocol. Guests are another story. That's going to be dependent upon where you are, right? So here in the state of Vermont, we had like a quarantine guideline. It changed again, as I recall. So it's just going to be whatever is the guideline that week, at least in our state. And if you're in a place that's totally open, Penny, then there may be no guideline. And that may be where it comes down to the venue or host having their own set of rules. What we have to rely on is a little bit of just honesty from people, that if they're not feeling well, they don't come to your event. And that has to be communicated with them ahead of time, so that if anybody suspects they're not well, they don't even try to come. That's what we should all be doing. We should all be canceling anything if we're not feeling 100% well right now.
And it's not a requirement. It is very strongly suggested by a lot of health officials to even have your guests do these temperature checks. Unfortunately, you're infringing on certain things there. So to mandate it is really a little bit difficult. I know, so I'm part of the Event Safety Alliance, as well as I'm a member of them, and they, for large scale kind of conferences and that sort of type of events, they have very clear that you should be checking temperatures as people come in. But this is more like a conference setting where you're sitting for long periods of times to do some learning aspects. So I could see that. Again, if somebody wants to uphold stricter rules, or even if a client themselves would like temperature checks upon arrival, you can, adhere to that, and you're going to feel better about it as well.
Right. So I think that we have touched on our three main things. Is there anything else you want to talk about with the training and prep? I don't want to cut that piece off, because it's an important aspect for us as business owners. If you have like the subcontractor, like Michelle mentioned, or a freelancer, however you pull together your staff for your seasonal business, it's about communicating with them knowing, doing the VOSHA training here in the state of Vermont, which is online and pretty quick and easy to read through. And again, a lot of the question, I won't call anybody out, I'm not trying to do that, but I see groups in Facebook groups asking questions that are very easily addressed in the VOSHA training. So even if you're not doing a wedding until September at this point, do the VOSHA training to get yourself educated on the very basic things. Like, for example, you would know that you need a preparedness plan like this if you just did the VOSHA training, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. And on top of that, it's keeping records. As a business, you should always keep records, written records of everything. I know it's tedious, but if you do have when you have your employees do the VOSHA training, make sure that you note that and that you have that on there. If you're going to have them doing any additional training, like I said, I had my staff do Serve Safe. So that's noted when it was completed and so on, and just making sure that you keep clear records of all of that, as well as any health questionnaires. If you're going to be asking your employees to take these health questionnaires or these little questions, you can make up a little chart that has their name on there, the 7 questions or whatever it may be, and a little date mark. And then you just keep that away and keep that away. Because if anything were to happen and the health department comes to your business and is asking questions, you have everything that you can provide them. Like I said, like as a venue, you already have your contact lists with the appropriate information for them to do contact tracing, and you've provided information on the things that you do to keep your employees safe. So if you're meeting all those guidelines, there isn't, there's always the chance of an outbreak. But you're just making sure that you're covered all the way around. Doing everything you can to prevent it. That's the best we can do, is like create these best practices. So, the main intention, right, is this idea that if we can work together to follow these best practices, we can keep our communities safe, right? That's what this is about. It's not just about, can you work as a wedding vendor to make money? It is about that, of course. Can you work? Is it safe? You can work. People have done weddings, right? There are weddings happening in our state right now. So it's not like people are waiting for a perfect plan to appear before they're starting to work. This plan exists, though, for you to help you move forward in a way that's really like the safest that you can be at this point, knowing that there's no such thing as risk-free. Let's see. If anybody has any more questions, feel free to shoot them in now. I see Judy saying safety card info should be communicated by the couple to their guests prior to the celebration. Right. I will share a PDF of that safety guideline from Krista Alexandra Designs so that people can see what it looks like and how you communicate. Lisa says, I noticed since I have begun my safety plan, I feel less overwhelmed. Oh, that's good to hear. I was also surprised how common sense the process are. You're right. As long as guests know what to expect, they will be able to relax and have a good time. I'm really glad to hear that because it's something like we have been talking about for weeks. And so it feels, like I said, when I went into that little country store and the guy wasn't wearing a mask and the donuts are on the counter, I'm like, wrong, right? But if you haven't been diving into this, you wouldn't necessarily know that. So I'm really glad to hear that diving into the plan, you felt less overwhelmed. That's really reassuring. And Lisa is a venue owner. Let's see. Judy says, thanks, Maricela, for all your hard work on this. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. And thanks, Allison, for getting this info out there. Oh, my pleasure. And Lori says, thank you so much. Okay. Is there anything else you're thinking you want to make sure we get out there? Anything I missed or? Not fully, no. I know that things will come up. I also included in the document just the regular cleaning and disinfecting. As well as, I know we touched on a few things about the events, but we did go through and add very specific details for each category or every involvement that goes into event. Myself as a planner kind of touch on everything and everyone when putting on an event. So I communicate every single detail of an event with every single vendor. And so I wrote in my expectations for each one of these vendor categories and how they should be doing things safely according to what is out there already for certain industries. And I have gone through as well, not only going through like the protocols that are out there, but there is a lot of guidelines that are put out by different industries that you can look up and take bits and pieces of what they're doing, what they found that is actually working for them, and embed it into your own programs. It takes a little bit of research, and I know I've done a lot of it on my own. and put it in here. But if there's something specific for your industry or for your company, look it up, see what's out there, see what other people are doing, and whatever functions for you, move forward with that.
Awesome. And we're available if you have questions. I mean, really, Maricela is the one you want to ask the questions of, but you can feel free, if you're watching this on a replay later, ask questions. Obviously, we're happy to help. Like, we're committed to getting this information out there in a really cohesive way. So if we need to hop on and do another live stream or create a resource page that addresses specific questions, like, just don't be shy about asking if you have questions for us. Let's see if we have anything else coming through here. Okay, Lori says, thank you so much. Lorraine says, thank you both so much. This is incredibly helpful. Penny says, good luck to us all. Happy eventing. And Heidi says, great job, ladies. Thank you for all your hard work. Awesome. Well, thank you, Maricela, for coming on live and doing this. I think this is exactly like the stuff that people need to know. And thank you for so many weeks of reading through so many documents and putting it all together like this, and then sharing, just in our real life tone, what this sounds like and what it looks like. When I talked to a bride yesterday who wanted to postpone or thought about doing something smaller, I was especially helpful, right? Because of knowing what you have shared. I was able to say, well, this will work, this won't work, this can happen, this can't happen. So people, they can make an informed decision now about what they're going to do. And I think they're going to probably choose to do a smaller event this year and a bigger one next year, which is a win, I think.
We have 2 events.
Exactly. They can have 2 events. Wow. Let's see. Lisa says, thank you so much. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Anything else you're thinking, Maricela? Are we ready to sign off?
No, I think we're ready to sign off. Just have to remember to be creative in the way that you do things. And once you really grasp the safety aspect of everything, you're going to be able to feel more comfortable moving forward yourself, because you do need to think about yourself and your business operations as well. Like, how comfortable are you going to be moving forward? And if doing all of this is all too daunting for your company and what you're able to do, that's where you have to assess whether or not you're able to move forward yourself.
That's right.
Put you first.
That's right. Like, people who are at high risk, photographers who seem to be some of the most worried, in terms, and why not, right? They have the most contact. The people have to make their own decisions. Just like some restaurants chose to not open, even though they could, you have to make choices that make sense for yourself. Make smart choices, as my sister-in-law would say. Just make smart choices. But being informed, the whole knowledge is power thing, being informed about these things can really help us. And like Lisa said, once she dove into it, it felt less overwhelming. So you dive into it, you don't feel overwhelmed, and then you can put the flourish on it, right? Where then you go, this is how we make it special. This is how, when you arrive and you check in, it doesn't feel like I'm, okay, name, date of birth, what's your mailing address, you can turn it into something that has a personal flair to it for them. You can turn it into hospitality, right? As Kim said. So, all right, we'll end it here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks for watching on a replay. And I have a feeling we might end up needing to do another one of these. So we'll see you next time.
Yes. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.